So are we going to start, or is there a introduction going to be?
No, sir, we will start some perfect time, sir.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I Sri Rudranarayan Das uh, from Jain College, Kompal, the Department of History, welcoming you all with a very good morning, one and all. We are heading towards a new lecture of Ranjit Guru Memorial Series of International Webinar organized by the Department of History and Political Science in a close collaboration with Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Odisha. So the broad theme of our webinar is Initiative Policy Dialogue 2020 COVID-19 and Live Practices Beyond Pandemic. So we hearty welcome to all participants, guests, and our students who join with us. And the topic of today's sessions are communication COVID-19 and the geopolitics of global pandemic. And the second topic, public health realities in India. To enlighten us on these said topics, we have with us eminent personalities across the world, across the globe, Professor Daya K. Thusu and Dr. Amar Jesani. So now I would like to request our head of the department, Professor Sarat Chandra Pradhan, to carry on the session by giving his welcome address. Professor Pradhan.
Thank you, sir. Dear friends, participants, and honorable speakers invitees, all are welcome to this burning virtual symposium on the theme Communicating COVID-19, the Geopolitics of a Global Pandemic. Friends, man does not live on bread alone. His next other basic need is communication. When a child comes out of the mother's womb, it cries only to communicate. Hence, communication is a natural and a transcendental attribute of the human beings. Hence, usually the rulers is the keeper of the secrecy, but the peoples are the teller of the tales. When the disease of the COVID-19 has posed as an unprecedented catastrophe before the human civilization and has threatened its very survival, its tales must be told in an pious manner. The knowledge in regards to its origin, incidents, manifestation, prevention, ferocity, and the fights needs to be known because of the symbol of the supremacy and increasing environment of suspicions and hatred in the international community. COVID-19 communication norm has been politicalized. It is not now a matter of health, rather it is now a determinant of international politics. When the US President Donald Trump emphatically use the term China virus instead of a coronavirus when there is a move to sterilize China by USA and other European countries, when there is an international hue and cry to hold China guilty before the international legal forum like International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court, when Trump declared stoppage of aid to World Health Organization, which is legalized an ally to Chinese conspiracy, and when there is a demand for damages and reparation from China, it is well inferred that the territorial ecology of the world politics has affected the world politics remarkably. However, now it is not a matter of the health, rather it is now a determinant of the international politics. Sorry. Above all, when some countries like India, who has out China stance, has concerned the international trend, and China has started to devise a new channels to the appease the opponents. Geopolitics is now a dynamic issue in the domain of the COVID-19. Hence, the theme of the symposium has far-reaching implications and is very much educative and impact building in nature. Hope this academic discourse by Professor Daya Tuishu will deliver us into reality and international truth. Friends, public health is a very old concept and practice in India. We had great scholars of medicine and health science in India. Ancient India had a sound public health delivery system. There were public hospitals and hospital for animals. In recent times, public health delivery system is a sacred obligation of the state. Emphasis has been given in the directive principle of state policy, enshrined a special article, that is Article 47, to improve public health. However, individual states of Indian Union are responsible for the running of the public health delivery system. That is why subjects like public health, sanitation, hospitals, and dispensaries have been enshrined in the state list in the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. In Indian context, if we will evaluate public health delivery systems, two aspects like human resources and professional ethics be the most determining factors. Role of doctors, nurses, and policymakers, and above all the patient is important. Professional ethics of the doctors with the Western medical education plays the great role apart from service, evenness, and facilities. Fourth, this topic will unravel the ground realities of Indian public health, delivery systems, and practices, and prescribe new paths. I extend a cordial welcomes to Dr. Amar Jasani, an eminent public health expert. Thank you all. Wish you a nice time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Pradhan. Now, I would like to request Ms. Payal Agarwal to give a brief introduction of the guests. Ms. Payal Agarwal.
Thanks a lot, Rudra sir, for giving me the opportunity. First of all, warm greetings to one and all. And it is said that within crisis are the seeds of opportunity. Jawaharlal Nehru College is situated in a remote location in Cuttack, Odisha. This college, along with Center for Adivasi Research and Development, has taken a small initiative to find out that opportunity by virtually connecting with intellectuals all across the globe within the COVID crisis. I, being a part of it, considered myself honored. Today's guest speakers are nothing less than a big treat for all of us. It is my proud privilege to introduce them. Professor Daya Kisan Thusu, an eminent intellectual and an expert in his work. He is a professor of international communication at the Hong Kong Baptist University. He was a distinguished visiting professor and inaugural Disney Chair in Global Media in 2018-19 at Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University in Beijing. For many years, he was a professor of international communication at the University of Westminster in London. Author and editor of 19 books, he is also the founder and managing editor of the Sage journal, Global Media and Communications. His extensive publications has took his work to infinity. In 2014, he was honored with Distinguished Scholar Award by the International Studies Association. This award was the first for a non-Western scholar in the field of international communication. It is really a huge success. Along with that, he has wide experience in journalism, serving at the Press Trust of India and an associate editor of Germany News Service in London too. I would also like to mention on this platform that the director of CARD, that is Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Mr. Bikram Kesari Jenna, has got the privilege to study under him. Really, sir, your expertise and academic achievements have amazed us, and we are quite happy to have you connected with us from far away for today's lecture. Sir, your topic as suggested by you is Communicating COVID-19, the Geopolitics of a Global Pandemic. Our next distinguished guest speaker is Dr. Amar Jesani. He is the editor of the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, public health expert, Mumbai, India. He is a medical doctor working as an independent consultant, researcher, and teacher in bioethics and public health in Mumbai. He is one of the founders of the Forum for Medical Ethics Society and also the founding trustees of the Anusandhan Trust, which manages the Health Research Institute, Sehat, that is Center for Enquiry into Health and Allied Theme in Mumbai, and the Health Action Institute, Sathi, that is Support for Advocacy and Training to Health Initiatives in Pune, India. Currently, he is a consultant and co-principal investigator of the Wellcome Trust, which support research project. He has also been researching the impact of torture prevention mechanism in India. He is a visiting professor at the Center for Ethics, Yenpa University, Mangalore, and also associate faculty at the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Culture at the Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplantation, Karachi. He is also a member of the International REC of the Medicine Science Frontier, the IRB of Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai, and the Central Ethics Committee of the ICMR. Describing about his achievements, I can only say it is simply endless. His tireless efforts in improving the public health of India has brought him wide acclaim all across the globe. Sir, thanks for giving your kind consent to connect with us. Sir, your topic as suggested by you is Public Health Realities in India. Now, I would like to stop here and invite Professor Daya to put forth his insightful views. Over to Professor Daya.
Thank you, Payal, for that very generous introduction. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Can I request your colleague not to, if I could do my presentation myself, that might be better, so I have control on the slides. Can you ask
Okay.
Chinmay? Yeah, so I'll try. If I have a problem, then I'll get to him. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So then I know what I am talking about, rather than just jumping slides from one point to another. It just makes more sense. So I wanted to start by thanking Dr. Jaina for inviting me to this webinar. And this dreadful pandemic, which has destroyed economies around the world, been responsible for so many deaths and illnesses. Among this doom and gloom, one positive thing that has come out of it is that we can have a conversation like we're having now. I'm sitting in my flat in Hong Kong, and I'm talking to people in India, in Odisha, but elsewhere. I expect Dr. Jasani is in Mumbai, and there might be people from other parts of the country or even abroad. And that I find is fascinating, especially for people like us whose job is to teach and communicate ideas. It gives us platform to be really a global communicator, and it's for free. And it's just I mean, I need to talk to my computer for an hour and it's done. Ordinarily, it would have been impossible for me to be in Cuttack during the middle of an academic term, and it probably would be impossible for the college there to actually afford the flight and etc. etc. So I would love to come to Cuttack, because Cuttack is the birthplace of one of the greatest sons of India, Netaji. And I did my progress. I obviously didn't realize something like pandemic will hit us all. It was not in my original plan. And now it has really changed everything from politics to economics to communication. I thought it was worth, doing something on this. I'm doing a chapter, or probably section of a chapter. I'm not sure yet, but I'm working on this. So the ideas I'm going to share with you are really very preliminary, and the point of the presentation is that you get an overview of what is the worst public health emergency in human history, how it has been politicized, and how it has really become part of a kind of a new digital Cold War. So I'll just refer to some of that with examples from different media and communication sources. I would not talk a lot about India because you guys are not aware of what's happening in India and the politics of domestic pandemic, if you like. But I'll look at the bigger global picture. Now let me then start with my presentation. I hope it works. See it? Can you? I can see it on my screen, but you can't. Okay, so maybe I'll have to go back to my help in Cuttack. Yeah, then I have to tell the slide. I can't do it here. I tried, unless somebody there knows how to do it. I don't, because I don't use it very much. As I say, I use Zoom. Okay, Chinmay is doing it. Thank you. No, I'll tell you when to move. Chinmay, go to the first slide, please. Yeah. I'll tell you when to move, please. Okay. And only then you move. Okay. So I would have loved to stay for Dr. Jasani's presentation, because from the description that was given to us, he seems to be an amazingly important person to listen to, given the circumstances in India. But unfortunately, I booked for another 2 Zoom meetings this afternoon after this, so I'll have to leave in about an hour and a half latest. Well, actually, yeah, an hour and a quarter. So apologies, peculiar to China, to its lifestyle, to what people eat, how they live. And here, well-known publications, one in France, one in Germany. The French one says yellow fever. It's the yellow danger, and there's a very deep kind of racist connotation to it. And Spiegel, a very well-known German magazine, very clearly says this is made in China. Although even now, so many months later, the jury is out on it. We don't know. But the presentation in the and these are mainstream publications. The initial presentation dominant presentation was that it was a peculiarly Chinese disease and eat. As it happens, I was in India in January when it started, and very similar stories were circulating in India as well. Can we move to the next one, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. The WHO, the World Health Organization, whose task is to manage global health issues. It is the apex United Nations body to deal with it. They came up with this phrase, infodemic. There's a pandemic, but there's also an infodemic. There is a lot of information circulating around the world, which is either false or propagandist or downright, lies. Here's just some compilation of what was happening in the early months in the United States. And these are headlines for top publications, including Time magazine, etc., in the United States. Now, remember, these publications do not just have a readership within the territorial borders of the United States. These are global publications. So what the US writes about this becomes the dominant story in the world. And you may have seen that video where Mr. Trump actually is COVID-19 to Chinese virus, and this is, in public domain. So it was, and again, you have to see it in the background of what preceded the pandemic, which was the year-long and continuing trade war between the two most powerful economies in the world, United States and China. So that's the backdrop against which this is happening. Can we move to the next one, please? As the president of the most powerful nation on the planet, which makes him the most powerful individual on the planet. In the initial weeks and even months, there was actually no suggestion that this is a serious public emergency, and it has a global implication. It was seen as something which is specific to a particular part of the world, specific to a particular culture, and how badly these people are managing it. Now, just kind of coverage would there been if it had emanated from Europe or America or somewhere in the Western world? Then the discussion would have been about healthcare and people dying and how do you deal with a health emergency. In case of China, what we heard was how bad the regime was, how they were trying to hide information about what was actually happening. And this entertainment in chief was a very important player in that. Can you move to the next one, please? Thank you. The apex organization for global health, World Health Organization, was presented as a stooge of China. It was called, only half jokingly, the Wuhan Health Organization, Wuhan being the place where the epidemic apparently started. And there was this tweet that had the top executive of WHO wearing Chinese flag mask on his eyes. And this is actually forwarded by Amitabh Bachchan of all people. And as you know, subsequent to that, United States actually withdraw its funding from WHO, which amounts for about a quarter of the budget of this organization. At a time when, probably first time in modern history, when WHO needed utmost support of the largest economy in the world. I'm getting some comments here. I cannot respond to them. I'm not in that age bracket that I can do multi-skill. So please bear with me. If you have questions, hold on to them. We will have time after I finish to answer at least some of them. Can we move to next one, please? Next slide. Thank you. Are you not doing it right? It's not on full screen. It's the bits that, I don't know. Okay. You see, this is a very interesting difference between China and India. In China, what they do very well is they do everything properly. And we tend to do everything not just quite properly for reasons which are many and complex. But I won't go there. Anyway, so this was a photograph which was circulating in the social media, but also picked up by certain mainstream media, which was telling the world that look, in China, in Wuhan, people are falling down like flies. And what it actually was a German art project. So these are all actors being filmed for a project, for art project. And this is one of the many examples of that infodemic I mentioned earlier. And thankfully, they were not always on the mainstream media, but they were circulating very widely in social media around the world. Next, please. Thank you. There were also a lot of stories about the intent behind this. The suggestion that this was not it was a man-made virus. It was manufactured in a lab in Wuhan. And there's a lot of literature around that. We don't know what the reality is. Biological warfare is at least 100 years old. And all major countries, all major powers indulge in it. But the overall implication of what was published, and these are serious publications. This is AP News Agency, which is a global news agency, Bloomberg top business publication, and Foreign Policy, a very respected policy journal. So this is how China's incompetence endangered the world. It's just to go to China and see what they've done and where the United States is, or Brazil is, or India is for that matter. How good their system is of testing and tracing. And I mean, it's just, I live in Hong Kong, I can tell you from personal experience. It's infinitely superior than anything available in London, where I was for the last 5 months. It's appalling there. Anyway, but China bashing was part of the dominant discourse. Can you move next one, please? And it was not just China. Interestingly enough, there were doubts being raised about other countries who were doing better than Europe. This, by the time it has hit Europe, Spain and France and especially Italy was in pretty bad shape. And remember, these countries actually have one of the finest public health systems in the world. And they had this because they initially, the first few months, they didn't realize, first few weeks certainly, that they thought it was a Chinese problem. It was not a global problem. Now here you have two cases, one from Bloomberg, and other from again from Foreign Policy Journal. Experts want to know why coronavirus hasn't killed more Russians. Just see the audacity of that headline, the arrogance of that headline. The assumption is that Russia is a kind of some third world country in Africa. I mean, it is one of the most sophisticated countries on the planet. They actually invented a lot of, vaccine, if you go back in history. They have fantastic universities. But in the Western discourse, it is a country where you can't trust the information. So obviously they're lying. And even more exciting was what they said about Vietnam. Vietnam, by the way, had done it very well, actually, extremely well. And not just Vietnam, across Southeast Asia, they managed it very well. Vietnam particularly. So Vietnam's coronavirus success is built on repression. Same trope that they used in China. But these are authoritarian regimes. They're communists. They don't care about human rights, and therefore they can manage things. Next one, please. There was also and continues to be an epidemic of misinformation, deliberate misinformation, where intelligence agencies, all kinds of corporate interests and fringe elements were being used, and they were sort of feeding each other. These are two pieces from The Guardian and the New York Times, pretty respected newspapers, liberal newspapers. The Guardian story says that COVID-19 misinformation essentially is pro-Trump and QAnon, which is a conspiracy theory group based in the United States but has big presence now in Europe also. Their Twitter bots found to be worst culprits. So this whole narrative which was being created was actually produced by machines, by bots, through social media. And a lot of it was can be traced back, which is story in The Guardian did, to this anonymous group called Q. And the New York Times had this exclusive: Trump officials are set to press spies to leak virus and Wuhan labs. Okay. This is New York Times. It's not a Chinese newspaper saying this. So obviously, there is politics, there's geopolitics, which is connected to what I said earlier, the ongoing trade war between China and the United States. Can we move to the next one, please? And then there were downright conspiracies which were circulating across the world, certainly in the Western world, certainly in the United States. There was this documentary called Plandemic, which has had millions of hits on YouTube. And this was an exposure by BuzzFeed Science about, basically saying that this is part of a conspiracy to undermine the whole idea of the COVID-19. And on the other picture here is about the most well-known American expert on this, and the suggestion was that he was party to the crime. He was actually involved in it. Did they create coronavirus in America? So that's the other story. The one is that the Chinese did it. The other story is that the Americans did it, and it's part of infecting people, and this world government kind of nonsense that you get a lot in parts of the United States and beyond. Can we move next one, please? Next slide. Thank you. I did say I won't talk about India very much, but I had to at least just one or two things. When it started, there was no tension on the border, right? So it was a very different equation at that time. There were no deaths on the border. So today it's a very different situation. Today, China is a very clear adversary to India. It's harming India's interests. In January, it was again seen as something which is a deliberate attempt by China to, as it says, Swarajya, which, as probably some of you would know, is a right-wing publication which has come up recently. It's actually, there was a much older publication by that name. Sri Rajaji used to edit it many, many decades ago. But they've resurrected it, and it's now a slightly more civilized right-wing publication in India today. And they had this cover story about super spreader. And then Times of India had that cartoon, Times of India, largest circulated English quality daily in the world. So it was already actually happening as a kind of part to seen as a China problem, and China is trying to take over the world by this corona. Can you move the next one, please? Thank you. And then there was a domestic political side to it, which in retrospect looks like idiotic, to put it mildly. The suggestion was that one particular community and its gathering in just outside Jamia Millia in Delhi was responsible for COVID coming to India. Well, they've probably forgotten that every seventh person on this planet is of Indian origin, and millions of us live outside India, and we travel back. I do 4 to 5 times in a year from all over the world, including China. But what we saw, and these are national television channels. These are not some kind of underground, some Hindu jihadi group. These are national television channels. Some of them actually have, think of CNN IBN is part of Reliance Group. It is the largest media group in the country, part of the largest conglomerate in the country. And this went on for days, if not weeks. And then it fed media, other media. It was in television, it was on radio, it was on social media, newspapers, etc. And talking to even educated, I was in India then, talking to educated people. They just believed it. This is just because certain community people are not following the protocols. As if everybody who's infected in India today belongs to a minority community. Anyway, can you move next one, please? Similarly, the domestic aspect of that politics you can see in many European countries and in the United States particularly, which is an anti-COVID protest. It's also something to do with this idea that we are a free country. We cannot wear masks, unlike the East Asians who are very conformist, and they realize it makes sense. Medical opinion says it makes sense. But I was in London for many months during from late February till August. I was there, and the big debate was whether we should wear the mask or not. I mean, it's just laughable, because it was a question of freedom, my freedom. I can go and infect people. And then you had this idea that these vaccines are being created by this evil called Bill Gates, and is going to make billions for him, and so we have to fight this. The anti-vaccine campaign became very important. If you are from the developing world, where there are so many diseases, we all have had a tika when we were kids because it was necessary. But if you're living in Sweden, you don't think this is a public health issue. Can you next one, please? There was also a lot of it's died down a bit now, but a lot of media coverage about the connection between 5G technology and coronavirus. There were instances where those towers, the telephone towers, were damaged, certainly in the UK and in many other places, in fact. And this is the famous Russian television channel called RT, and they had many programs, because one of the specialties this RT has that it pushes conspiracy theories. Anything which is it gives it some ammunition to beat the Americans or the Western people. Generally, it does that. So it made a meal out of it. But it was not just RT. I just mentioned it to give it a kind of global perspective, but actually it was happening in many other countries and many other media. So My own work, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm writing something on this geopolitics, so this is going to be part of the discussion. But I have been interested for many years now in looking at media beyond the kind of dominant strands of it, namely beyond the Anglo-American media, the English language media, which remains extremely important. But there has also been extraordinary growth of other media. Think of India itself. The biggest growth in media is in Indian languages, not in English language. The audience figures for English channels, I guess, against regional channels or Hindi channels is a case in point. Can you move to the next one, please? Next slide. Thank you. So I've been working in this field for some time. This is a book, BRICS Media, Reshaping the Global Communication Order. It's coming out hopefully by end of November. This is or December. It's in production now. And the other book is about China. I was there. It was mentioned in the introduction. I was there for a year. I was for academic year in Beijing. So we did this book with a colleague there and a colleague in London. First English language book which looked at the globalization of Chinese media, because I wanted to just give you a sense of how China is reacting to this largely Western, largely US originated discourse about COVID-19. So this is kind of academic background from where I'm coming in this field. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. So China Daily is one of their English language newspapers, which has various editions, including the US and UK, etc. This is what they did when they start. This is before Corona had become a very big global problem. They started sending aid as part of their soft power, as a part of their diplomacy, to various countries. And as you see on this, from Italy to France to India to South Korea to Japan, it was quite a wide-ranging approach. But if you look at those ads, it's not very clear on this slide because I don't know, maybe it's not on my screen. For each of these countries, and these are just selection, there are many more. They used a poem or they used some kind of historical connection that China has with each of these countries, whether it's Italy or India or Korea or whatever. So it was done in a very subtle way. That look, we have had a very bad press, but we want to help, especially we want to help the poor countries. And you may remember there were cases when they were sending stuff which was substandard. Many countries, including Turkey and India, actually, they said, no, this is not good enough quality. It doesn't pass the quality threshold in our country. So there was that side of it as well. But as far as the Chinese government and its own propaganda machinery was very, very keen to promote a certain version that, look, we've got a very bad press, and to counter that, we are actually giving, aid, medical kit, and masks, etc., etc. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. This is a tweet from a Chinese embassy in Italy. Because you remember, Italy was the worst hit country in Europe. And some of you may know this, but actually the largest number of Chinese people who live in Europe live in Italy. Not in the UK or, this worldwide thing, but actually in Italy. And it's a recent migration, but that's a different discussion. So if you look at this again, it's, we are good friends, and we have to help each other. And it may just be a coincidence, but Italy was the only G7 country, apart from China, of course, not China, only G7 country which joined the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, which, you know, India was first not to join, wisely, I would say. Next, please. But as this debate heated up, Chinese propaganda also became more assertive. So here is a cartoon from CGTN, which is China Global Television Network, which is their, you know, global television, new television network. And Anti-China Virus Made in America. That was the title of the cartoon. And here you have the Secretary of State, Mark Pompeo, doing that, creating it, making it anti-China. And this was soon, you know, after Mr. Trump had very openly said that it was Chinese virus, Wuhan virus, etc. In his official statements, not just in his, you know, tweets that he writes in wrong English in the middle of night. Anyway, so assertiveness on the part of the Chinese began to, and this is one example. There are many, many more. It also started to float an idea to counter the allegations that the virus was created in Wuhan in a lab. In other words, it was a conscious decision by the Chinese to develop it and then allow it to travel around the world. So what I mentioned earlier about the conspiracy theories which were circulating widely, and if you do a Google, you will find dozens of those. They look very credible because they're presented by people who are extremely articulate and they sound very knowledgeable. But if you dig deeper, there are problems. And this is, again, a deeply political project. You know, if you go back in history, propaganda is central to how governments communicate, how corporates communicate. Maybe more subtle today, but actually fundamentally it is the same. So what was interesting, normally, I mean, Chinese are discreet. They don't, unlike the Americans, they don't talk very much, or us Indians, they don't talk very much. They're very, very precise. Boringly so, in fact. But here was a tweet. Can you go to the next one, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. From the spokesman of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's saying that there is this argument circulating in social media that actually it is an American project. The Americans were doing some warfare, and something happened, it leaked out, and it's an American, not our problem. Now, look at the irony of it. The irony is that in China, you cannot use Twitter, it's banned. They have their own version. You don't have Google, you don't have Facebook, you don't have Amazon, you don't have YouTube. That's an interesting story, how they have developed their own, but that's a different lecture. The point is that they were using this Western platform, American platform, to tell the world, retweet it, because this explains why there is this global pandemic. So, and what they were basing on is actually a very, very flimsy argument that can be dismantled in 5 minutes by a semi-literate scientist. Anyway, but that's a different discussion. So this battle of a kind of competing narratives, essentially between the United States and China, became more and more heated. And today it is, I mean, you saw that a couple of days ago, President Trump was addressing the United Nations. Of course, virtually, he wasn't there in New York. And he used the word China, virus, and China is responsible, this, etc., etc. There is talk in the United States that they should, because Americans owe China trillions of dollars. and saying, we're not going to give this back to you. We're going to charge you for what you have done to the whole world. So we'll see how that maps out, but it's interesting. While this political tutu meme is continuing and is heating up, and is, in my view, directly connected with the November election, and I'm hoping by then, after that, it will calm down. The situation, as far as COVID is concerned, has been stabilized in China. In Hong Kong, where I live currently, it's almost normal. Can we go to the next one? Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, there were a few weeks ago, there was some videos and pictures circulating on social media and mainstream media about this poolside party in Wuhan. Some of you may have seen it. If not, just go Google, do a Google in Wuhan, poolside party, you'll see it. They're celebrating. They're saying, we done it. We dealt with it. More importantly, if you look at the chart next to the picture, it's the latest data from OECD. Of all major economies, China is the only one where you have positive growth. GDP is growing, not shrinking as elsewhere. In India's case, as you know, we are very badly hit. Many other developing countries are even worse because they don't have the scale. So probably they deserve to party. They dealt with it. And now they're saying, we're going to distribute the vaccine that we are developing for free as a global public good. Americans have very openly said that we can't do that. We won't do it as a public good. This will be a commercial enterprise. The Europeans are more careful. The Oxford people are more careful. Although that's a commercial venture too, but they're, the Brits are good at hiding what they mean to say. So, so the geopolitics takes a very different turn. That the country from where it all started and spread around the world has recovered. And in many parts, actually in Europe, for instance, now, there is a very serious worry that there will be a surge as winter approaches, and there will be many more deaths. WHO said yesterday or day before that they are thinking in terms of 2 million casualties globally. Can we move to the next one, please? Next slide. Thank you. Then there is TikTok. I have to mention that because for India, TikTok, especially, I don't know how many of the participants are young who use TikTok. I didn't even knew it existed until when I was in Beijing. I took our class. I was teaching American kids to TikTok headquarters. They invited us, and it was fascinating. It is the top download today. Billions of people have downloaded it. And as we know, there are security issues, data stealing, etc., etc. Americans want to buy it, and etc. Well, don't go there. But also look at Zoom, which also has interesting Chinese connections. And actually, I don't know how many of you use that. I'm sure you're using that. It's much better than Google Meet. It's far sophisticated technology. So people sometimes forget how advanced East Asia is technologically, because we are obsessed with the West. We think all great ideas come from there, despite overwhelming evidence to show that is not always the case. So, for example, the mobile payment system that they have here in China is most sophisticated in the world. It works. I've been to rural China. It works there. It doesn't work the same way in Europe. Even in Germany, which is more advanced than most other European countries. And America is quite primitive, sorry, despite all the Silicon Valley, all the great things they have there. Because there isn't that public investment, it's always privately oriented. What the Chinese have done, and they've invested in infrastructure. Think of the 5G. And 5G is not just about making a telephone call. It's about Internet of Things. It is the next level of digital communication. And again, they have just, you have to go to the World Intellectual Property Organization's website and see how many patents Chinese companies have, and where we are. We were ahead of them. The IIT was set up in 1950s. We were the IT superpower of the world. हम उसी में रहेगा ना, हिंदू मुस्लिम यूपी बिहार साउथ इंडिया नॉर्थ इंडिया, this caste that caste, Riya Chakraborty, what is she wearing, and what how much drug the X person took or not to take. Laughable. This is national discourse at a time when we have one of the most serious public emergency in our history, health emergency. Can you move to the next one, please? Next slide. Thank you. So this is very latest, September 23rd. So daily new confirmed cases. We lead all the time, so we're leading. We are ahead of even United States. And we don't have the infrastructure for testing in rural India. But the veracity of tests is not proper. हम लोग properly काम नहीं करते ना. Test हो गया, ठीक है. 2 दिन बाद नहीं यार ठीक नहीं था, तो गलत हो गया. Because the guy didn't do it properly, the instrument wasn't right. We don't care. This is in Delhi, not in rural Odisha. So when the Koreans or the Thais or the Japanese or the Chinese do it, we say, well, how can they do it? But they do it properly. So actual figures are much, much higher. Some experts from very distinguished backgrounds suggest that it could be 10 times, even 20 times more. And we're talking about Riya Chakraborty. I mean, we need to think more carefully about our priorities. And I think that's also connected with a certain geopolitical shift in the sense that we tend to really, so for example, our border problem with China, it is so serious because we are in a very vulnerable situation at the moment. We're dealing with this amazing, problem. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Even if there is a vaccine available in the next 3, 4, 5 months, its distribution, production, we have 1.3 billion people. It's massive. So we cannot afford, and the Chinese know that. That's why they're pushing us. They want to be nasty. We have to be very, very careful. So in that sense, geopolitics becomes very important. We are somehow, I don't know why people are thinking, oh, the Americans will come and help us. They won't, because they have so much invested in China. And China has so much investment in their country. They have all kinds of connections, which they don't have with us. So priority should be this. Let me move to my final slide, and then we'll probably have some time for discussion. Okay, so The Economist magazine had this cover story some weeks ago, simply saying, is China winning the geopolitical consequences of COVID-19? And this is a very conservative magazine, as you know. Its suggestion is that China is winning because it has dealt with it at an early stage. Its economy is back on track, and it has now it can do what I was saying earlier. It's okay. We are going to give help to poorer countries, and we can. At the time when America is saying America first, when Europe is in a mess, when Brexit has happened, so the West is actually in serious trouble. We were doing well, and we could have been at a different level, but COVID has hit us badly. And then this jihad and all this stuff that we do, and our priorities are skewed in a very tragic way. A country of the sophistication and intelligence and scale of India should not be talking about a Bollywood star for hours on end on national television. That is insulting. I was a journalist I have lots of very good friends who work in the media. They're very clever people. They know what they're doing is not only illegal, you're invading somebody's privacy. You're getting those private chats, and you are flashing them on national television. The kind of thing even Fox News in the United States doesn't do. And this is so un-Indian. This is so crude. It baffles me. How can we? Why don't we turn the damn thing off? Right. So I used the phrase Corona as Cold War. So although with the grace of God, we might have a vaccine in the next 6 months or a year, and it might be controlled in some shape or form, but the forces that it has unleashed, the new Cold War that now we sort of use routinely as something which is there in the background, is not going to go away anytime soon. And as I said earlier, maybe the November election is an interesting marker. What happens then? If Mr. Trump is back in power, which in my humble view is very likely, then we have another 4 years of disruption. And for us in India, it's extremely important, therefore, to not only protect our borders, but when Modi says we have to be Atmanirbhar, we have to be Atmanirbhar. We cannot depend on supplies and from countries which might be and are in fact adversarial to us. And it is just an imperative, and I'm sure policy people, educated opinion in India is very aware of that. It's not just an empty slogan. It has to have, context, body to it. And if you look at PPE and the amount of PPE that's produced in India today, it's an extraordinarily successful story. So I think one good thing that might come out of it, that the countries would think, okay, we need to be self-reliant. And India has all the ingredients for that. Why should we have our agarbattis made in Vietnam? What's happened to our own? Agarbattis have been in India since time immemorial. Why do we need to buy them from somewhere else? So on that auspicious note, I will stop. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks a lot to you, sir, for providing an insightful viewpoint. It is true that on the one hand, the world is battling with coronavirus, and on the other, infodemic on WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media actually spreads and serves as more disastrous. And sir, you have rightly aware us about its connection with geopolitics too. Sir, as there are a couple of questions in the chat box, so I'd like to invite Mr. Shubham Das to initiate the discussion forum. So he will read the questions for you.
Thank you, ma'am. There are 2 or 3 questions for Professor Dayat Yusuf. One question is from SK Imran. What are the major geographical regions behind oil rates changing during pandemics time in international market? What is the geographical impact in national security? Sir, please unmute yourself. Professor Dayat Yusuf, sir. Please unmute yourself, sir.
I could not hear your question very clearly. Can you please either speak loudly or repeat it, please?
Okay. What are the major geographical regions behind oil rates changing during pandemics time in international market? What is the geographical impact in national security?
Okay, it's not my field. It's about oil. Yeah, why oil is not selling as much as it should be. It's a very simple answer. Transporters, it was lockdown all over the world. Is that the question? I'm sorry, I don't really understood the question very clearly. So then there was a question about security. Is that right? There was an allied question. Is it oil security?
Sir, another one question is from Siddharth Sankar Ratha. Why China failed to prove that it was not a Chinese virus? Is there any communication lacuna or have no clues to hide the truth? As you living in Hong Kong, how you see the role of China?
Thank you. The Chinese were, as far as I can tell, initially in the first few weeks, they were very, very limited in giving information out, because from my understanding of talking to people here and in elsewhere, is that the Wuhan party setup were hiding information from the Beijing authorities, and that delay of few days or even weeks was crucial, because that was the period when the Chinese New Year was starting, and that's a big holiday in China where millions of people travel, including from Wuhan. So because of that, there was a spread which could have been stopped. So that was one mistake that they don't admit it, of course, but that's what the people who know about the situation, whether Chinese or non-Chinese, tell me. The other argument which is being proposed by some people, especially in the US, was that after the initial week, they actually banned all flights from Wuhan to other parts of China, but they did not. So is the allegation. I'm not sure whether that's true or not. I haven't checked it, but the allegation is that they did not stop international flights. So people were traveling. They might have been carrying the virus without knowledge, right? So let's not forget, China is a one-party state. It is run by a communist party system where the media are totally controlled by the Communist Party. And so there was, of course, you might know the story of one particular doctor who actually sent a message in a social media group to suggest that this was something new and this needs more care. It's not just a flu. And he was sacked. He was reprimanded and he was sacked. And he actually got infected and he died. So he's now become a martyr in China. That's just the one story which came in the open. There might be many more. So those initial weeks, the way they dealt with it by not providing information, not only to WHO, there was a lack in that also, but more wider world was a factor which led to, it's people not realizing the import of it, how big it was. But that's something to do with the system that the China has, the information management system, and the fact that, unlike our country where we have, different opinions, people are free to express those opinions. In China, you can't do that. So the state says we're not going to, let this information go out. That stays within country. Although they on social media, I hear there were lots of murmurs and the people were talking about it. So that would be my answer.
Sir, another question is from Chinmay Kumar Sahu. Is Wuhan lab a testing lab for biological war weapons? From social media trending. Question is asked. Is Wuhan? Yes.
I have no idea. I can't respond to that question. Because although I've been to Wuhan once for a conference, it's a lovely city. This was before the virus, but I don't know. That's the simple answer. I don't work for the intelligence. This is something which intelligence people would know, or very high-level scientists, because they might be involved. I am neither.
Thank you, sir, for responding all the questions. Over to Payal, ma'am. Please continue this session.
Okay, thanks a lot to Professor Daya for responding the questions. And now I would like to invite Dr. Amar Jesani to give his insightful thinking.
Before you do that, can I apologize? I said at the beginning of my talk, I have to be in another meeting in 10 minutes. So I will not be able to listen to Dr. Jesani's talk. But if you could send me his email at some point, I will try to contact him. And by the way, are you recording this?
Yes, sir, we are recording this.
Okay, so I can probably access that and watch it or something.
Yes, sir, we will provide you with that.
Thank you. So thank you so much for inviting me. And if anyone has any other questions, my email is with the organizers. Please feel free to contact me. I'm really sorry that I have to leave, but it was great to talk to you guys. Have a lovely conference, rest of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot, sir. It's indeed our pleasure to have you with us. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
May I now request Mr. Amar Jesani to give his insightful thinking? If Dr. Amar Jesani is with us, so I may.
Yes,
I'm here.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Sorry, I was on a phone, so I didn't hear. Are we starting, or there is still the previous session going on? Am I supposed to start now?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. You can start.
Sorry, yeah, okay, fine. Let me share my presentation. Are you able to see this? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are able to see that your presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry, I listened to the previous presentation off and on, not continuously, but much of it I did listen to, because I also wanted to know the viewpoint of the political science and the geopolitics of all. And that is the same thing came out about China and how Chinese did not provide full information and the whole rebuttal from the China on it. So it's an interesting area. I'm going to concentrate more on India, and what I'm going to do is not just talk about broad public health, because I don't think it will interest you, because you are not the students of the public health. I think none of you come from medicine, right? So I come from medicine and went into public health and social sciences. So I have a different journey. So I'm going to concentrate on public health dimension, ethical dimension, and look at governance and safety issues related to it. And then if you have questions, we can discuss the question. I don't know how many of you have ever visited our journal that we publish. This is the only journal on healthcare ethics published from India for last 29 years. We started in 1993. And it's a peer-reviewed journal. It is free to publish. It is open access, entire database of last 29 years. You can explore, do searches, and get the material. So anybody interested in the issues of health can access this journal. And we had last two issues focusing on the COVID pandemic. There are a large number of articles published there. I don't think any other medical journal has published as much except two public health journals. So it's a material that you need to read in case if you are interested in looking at the public health dimension. What I'm going to do is go into few issues. There was a massive influenza epidemic 100 years back. So just do a little comparison. That was 1918. This is 2019. You have 101 years difference there. And this is also influenza. That was also influenza. The need for ethics framework for the governance of the response to the pandemic. I'm not as worried about the pandemic as I'm worried about the way governments and people are responding to it. Okay. Then comes Syracusa Principles. What are the broad principles on which such response should be based? So that gives you some time to refer to, what should be there. Then it's about frontline workers, privacy and confidentiality issues of scarce resources, hospitals, rationing, and all issues that do. And then care of the vulnerable and the research in the pandemic. Last issues, perhaps I may not be able to go, but their slides are there. So if I have time, I'll definitely take them out. So you all know what is epidemic. These are the definitions in case any one of you is not able to have a clear definition, then you can use it. The occurrence of more cases of disease, injury, or other health condition than expected in a given area or among the specific group of persons during a particular period. So this is how epidemics are defined. Pandemic is more at a worldwide or a section of the world getting affected, and it usually affects a large number of people across the countries. So it becomes international character. The effective reproduction number is quite used in order to find out how infective is the causative organism. It is called RO, or average number of people infected by a single infectious person. By reducing this number, you may be able to reduce the transmission. In the current COVID transmission, the RO is very high as compared to the others that happened recently. This is you can do the comparison what happened 100 years back and what is happening now. In 2018, when the influenza pandemic took place in the world, at the time there was a world population of 1.5 billion. Okay, 500 million got infected at the time. That means almost 1/3 of the world was infected by it. And there are 50 million deaths. That means almost 3.3% of the people who died. On the other hand, in India, in 2020, you have COVID pandemic world population of 8 billion. By May 2020, you had 6 million infected. By September 2020, you had 33 million infected. And yet, it is such a small proportion of the population. If you take those cases which were not detected, Because ultimately what happens is that if you are able to detect it, you count it. Otherwise, you don't count it. Some say that, well, there may be 60, 70 or 80 times more people infected than actually reported. At least in India, that is what people will say. Because there are a lot of asymptomatic cases. The number of states, including your Odisha, I think UP and Bihar, they are doing very less number of testing than the others are doing. So the number of infection is still, even after including that, we are not going to have a 1/3 of the world infected. So it's infection is still low as compared to what was there in 100 years back. Death rate is, as you can see, is still very, very low. Even if it is underreported, say by 100%, that means it is double than that what it is. Still, it is very, very low as compared to what was there in 1918. In 1918, influenza pandemic, you had a large number of young people died. That was immediately or during the First World War. And that's how huge number of people who were living together as a part of the armies, they got affected. And when they went back to their home, they carried the infection. The people who died were very young. In 2020, you have most of them who died more than 75 years of age. Almost no death in the nursing homes at that time. This time, people who have died in the Western countries, they are mainly from the nursing homes. Unfortunately, for the South Asian countries, the death rate is very, very low as compared to the death rate in the developed countries. Anyway, let us go to the ethical framework. Why there should be an ethical framework about how government should be responding and what kind of governance should be there. Once you have this framework, you can apply it to understand whether what Indian government did in last 6 months was ethically good or bad. You can make a judgment. So this ethical framework emerged in last few years. There was Zika virus pandemic. There was H5N1 avian or bird flu pandemic. There was H1N1 swine flu pandemic, and there was a massive pandemic of Ebola in the countries of the Western Africa. So these are the experiences which poured into creating this framework. While each pandemic needs to be specifically assessed and responded to, there are learning from each that help reduce knee-jerk panicky response and ensure that the response to it is appropriate to the situation. So you have to ensure that when such things happen, you don't panic. I think India panicked. The way India responded, within 4 hours' time, you had a national lockdown. That was a very knee-jerk, very without thinking about the consequences. The response was given, and it was given without consulting the public health experts of India. They had a committee where many public health experts were there, but the political leadership did not consult them, and then just imposed lockdown without that. So it's a very important issue that you need to keep it in mind, that you have to be more reasoned, you have to have full head at that time. Otherwise, you are going to be panicky and then you react, and it will create problem, as it happened here. When we had a very low infection rate, at that time we locked down the country. And after 2-3 months, when we started lifting the lockdown, by the time the infection had gone up. So the lockdown slowed down the infection, did not stop it. And when you started opening it up, at the time, instead of things going down, it is going up, and it has continued to go up. It has not stopped at all. So this is a whole mess that we are in, is related to how we have responded to it. So it's very important that we don't have knee-jerk reaction. We have very considered reaction. Need to control transmission of infection often involves the restriction of rights, and that is what has happened. Yours and mine rights are restricted to such an extent that I can't come to you directly and speak in your class or in your auditorium. I have to speak say, this way. All human contacts and everybody is these personal rights have been restricted. So when that happens, what is the responsibility of the government, or how the ethical way of doing it? What should be the government give you in lieu of you giving away your political rights? So this is a very important question that we need to keep in mind. So what are the principles that have evolved? And I think we will go into the guidelines on that. Restrictions on the individual civil rights are justified on the basis of the protection of population from infection. This is the justification. A public health way of restricting individuals' rights is not for the purpose of repressing people, but it is for the purpose of protection. Keep this in mind. When you see all those photographs and the videos where police is beating up people, that itself shows that our communication has failed. We are not convinced people why rights are being restricted. There is no violence going on where in order to stop violence, you have to go and repress people who are doing violence. There's curfew kind of stuff. Lockdown is actually to reduce infection, to protect people, and people should be able to understand it. Where the police action should be minimum. The self-discipline should be the highest. And that will happen provided people understand it and people's condition is good enough not to violate it. Suppose you are a very poor person, you lock down and have nothing to eat. Whether you like it or not, I am going to come out on the road because I have to eat something. I have to get it from somewhere, isn't it? Unless you provide it, I am not going to stay in the house because I am hungry. You have to keep that in mind. So it's not about repressing people, but it is protecting and caring for the people. You know, when you do it as a part of the public health, and when you do it as a part of repression, it's totally different question, right? Therefore, restriction is accompanied by obligation. If you restrict my activity, my political rights, my civil rights, you have obligations to do something for me. Otherwise, I cannot accept the restriction. In fact, the higher the restrictions, the greater the obligation to fully care for the well-being and sustenance of the people's livelihood. It's very important issue that one needs to keep it in mind. And when you look at state government of India, when it restricted everybody's rights to move around and earn their livelihood, did they take into consideration these obligations of theirs? These are the documents, international documents from where you will find these ideas that I am presenting to you. Syracusa is very important because it came from the International Commission of Jurists. And the second one is the guidance for the managing ethical issues in infection disease outbreak, that is from World Health Organization. Syracusa Principle evolved long back in 1984. So it's almost 35, 36 years old, but it still remains valid. What guidelines of the WHO does it is to translate them into the current context. What are the Syracusa principles? Major thing. One is that when you use restriction on people, civil and political rights of the people, it must be based on scientific understanding. There should be evidence-based. That yes, these restrictions are really going to help. You have to have a very good strategy worked out that what is the right time to put the restriction. If you put the restriction early, you are going to be in trouble because at that time when the infection is low, you put restriction, but you cannot keep the restriction for a very long time. So we'll have to, lift them, and at the time you will have a major problem. So you have to have a restriction at the right time in order to flatten the curve. You start with the least restrictive means. That means if certain areas are having more infection, start restriction there. Certain kind of restrictions may be started and then expanded. Gradually you make restriction more severe as per the requirement. And it has to connection with the scientific basis. What is the evidence coming out from the epidemiology, from the public health? So you have to keep doing those surveillance and studies, and based on that, you need to decide. When you do it, you must take into consideration what would be the cost and logistics. It's not just cost and logistics in terms of imposing restriction, but what are its consequences, right? Will it create inhuman conditions? So that is the fourth one. Ensure that conditions are human, right? Address financial and social consequences for the people. People who are surviving on day-to-day earning, they are going to be in big trouble. So you must ensure that these people are provided support, and you must see that if they are not able to have their own money to buy food, you provide the food. And that's what happened during this lockdown. Government did not do much. There were NGOs who went around and distributed rations, started community kitchens. This is at least happened in Bombay. I don't know what happened in Odisha, but and other places. But it's very, very important that when government does it, it does address the cost, logistics, human conditions, financial and social consequences. And you must keep legal processes intact. Access to law should never get restricted. Why? Because when this kind of restrictions are being imposed, there are lots of possibility of excesses. There are a lot of possibility of people being unnecessarily penalized. The repressive agencies like police and others become very, very powerful, and they can do things which requires a due process to fight back, to get justice. And that has to be open. All those things that happened where Prashant Bhushan, did a tweet, and then he had to face the music of the court. But the court was also in fault because it really restricted people's access to the law. The law should be available, and courts should have at least been very, very aware that when there are restrictions put by the state has certain obligation. If they are not being met, then people have right to criticize courts also. How can courts say that millions of people who are walking back to their home because they were not provided any kind of logistical support, transport and all, the people who were migrant workers, right? And he refused. And when the first time issue was brought to them, they refused to take it. So these were very irresponsible things, because this Syracusa Principle comes only from international, jurist council. The court should have known about it, and it should have taken immediately an action and made it mandatory for the state to provide logistical support to them. I think that limitation is very, very important. So due process just cannot be violated at the time. Equitable application. You must see that some people are not unnecessarily penalized as compared to the others. And this happened, you all know. That certain communities, when they violated, they were repressed very strongly, while other communities were not touched. So religious congregation, of certain kind were allowed, other kinds were, taken in a very, very bad manner. So importance of communication. That is what I was telling you earlier, that when you impose restriction, people should be told, people should be convinced that this is the right restriction, and it is in for their good, and it is not being done in order to say, do something totally different. Well, you will find here that when the restrictions related to COVID were going on, there were other repressive measures, were also being done by the state, which is not allowed, which is not the right thing to do. Anyway, come to the another part. That was about the lockdown and the restriction. This is about frontline workers. Who are frontline workers? They are called essential, services workers. Yeah, health professional, paraprofessional, sanitation workers. You have crematorium and graveyard workers. These are the people who are going to be working day and night during the pandemic. You and I may not, because we come from the educational sector. And these are the people who are going to be more exposed to the risk of contracting diseases. Some of them may have social ethical obligation to assume certain level of personal risks as a part of their professional or employment condition. Like you are a doctor and you're working in the government institution, they can give you order that yes, we can't do it because you have to do this work. If you don't do it, you may lose your license even to act to practice as a doctor or practice as a nurse, right? Because that is what is the you are saying. Although as far as possible, all of them should be convinced and should participate voluntarily. But in so many cases, like a crematorium workers or graveyard workers, there is nothing written like that. They are not professional. They are mainly manual workers. And here also, in order to make them work for that, you have certain obligation, right? Others may not have such moral legal obligation as stated at all, but yes, they are required. Importance of clearly spelling out criteria and procedure for the frontline workers is very, very important. And government declared a lockdown, it should have laid down what are the rights and obligations of these workers. What we call in ethics is a reciprocal obligation. If somebody takes risks for you, you have to reciprocate that, and that reciprocal obligation is the one that these frontline workers need. First is that minimize risk of infection. That means provide them personal protective equipment. That should become the biggest priority. That is where the most investment go, not to other things, in order to protect them. Provide them appropriate remuneration. You can look up what happened actually in India, both in PPE and in about remuneration. Many of the health workers were working and fighting COVID, and they were not getting salaries. They were not getting, enough PPE. So doctors may get PPE, but nurse will not get. Nurse will get, but ward boy will not get. That is how there was no preparation made by the state in order to provide this kind of tools. Remuneration also, I found a lot of people where a lot of advertisement came out because to fill up the vacant position and the and salary being offered was very, very low. It should have been higher because of this risk is higher. No, it was not done. Priority access to healthcare when they become sick, when they get the infection. They must be provided priority in the care. That was not done. Many doctors had to wait for a long time to get the bed. Support for reintegrating into the community, another problem. Community was so stigmatizing those people. The doctors were stigmatized to such an extent. Other health workers also, the nurses and the other people from the hospital were stigmatized to such an extent that they won't allow, in Bombay kind of situation, they won't be allowed to come inside the building. Although they were keeping away simply because they didn't want to reinfect anybody. But there was also a lot of stigmatization about it. There should be assistance to family members because these health workers will have to stay in the healthcare institution or in the nearby hotel for days together, weeks together. Family requires the assistance at that time, which nobody had thought of and provided support. But these are all part of the reciprocal obligation when some people are taking a risk to fight the epidemic. Second area is surveillance. Data collection continuously is required during pandemic, so that you are able to design good strategies and have a right program. So, but the way it was done by some of the people in India at the time was violating the privacy and confidentiality and the safety of the people involved. Personal information confidentiality protection is needed. If you are violating it, you must have a very, very strong reason. By violating it, are you really making any dent into the infection? They did it No dent was there. Why? Because you were just violating for the heck of violating. Putting boards outside people's houses saying that these people are COVID positive. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Right? On the contrary, those people get victimized to such an extent that the other people who get positive, they will not report that they are having infection. This is the problem. People start hiding it, and once they start hiding it, there is more infection rather than having less infection. In the surveillance data collection, should it be mandatory for everybody to provide data information? They will say yes, it should be mandatory. No problem. Yes, it could be. But if information is taken, what is the reciprocal responsibility? You have Arogya Setu, right? That app that will take the information. It will see that who are the people closer to whom you have gone to, all those kind of stuff. But who is using this data? Is there any law providing data protection that it will not go and not be taken away for commercial use by the other people? Nothing. If it is not there, you have a problem. If there is no mandatory requirement, then people should have right to refuse, right to opt out. Should their consent be obtained? All those issues are very, very important. Disclosing information collected from surveillance activities to individuals and community. When you do surveillance, you are finding. You should come out and make available to everybody. There was a big controversy about the sero surveillance data. Sero surveillance was done in the month of May. And it comes out, the finding comes out in September. Why so late? Because the government did not want researchers to make available all the findings, particularly findings of hotspots, where contamination zone, where there was a high infection, where the sero surveillance was carried out. They didn't want that data to be included in the paper that was to be published in the journal, so that everybody comes to know about it, or data to give to media. After they did it in May, June, July, August, 3 months, the journalists, the researchers kept asking for the data that you did this survey. Where is the data? Data never came out. Until I think about a week, 10 days back, it came out in Indian Journal of Medical Research, and the data did not have, the hotspot data. They were separated out and they were not allowed to be published by the government. It's a kind of a censorship. This is a problem. It's very important that whatever information you are collecting in a proper format with a proper education for the people are made available. So that communication is very, very important. The sero surveillance tells you what are the number of people who actually got infected and were having antibodies of different kind in their body. That actually gives you an idea of the spread of the infection. And then once you have that the broad epidemiological idea, then you can design your next stage of intervention in fighting against the infection, keeping that in mind. Biological specimens are collected. All these samples are taken, for testing. Will you make people name known about it? Those who come positive, negative. The whole issue of confidentiality, as I said, is there. But this material that is collected, is it destroyed after doing testing? Or is it kept in the laboratory and supplied to pharma companies and others for making money? Does this material that comes is sent out abroad? This has happened. This was a big controversy about Ebola when the Ebola infection took place in West Africa, where the mortality rate was very high. Something like 20 to 80% of the people who got infected, they died. Okay, it's very, very high mortality rate. Infectivity rate was low. That means virus's capacity to infect other was low, but death was very, very high. And those samples at the time they collected, they all went out of Africa and went into the Europe and US and other places. for the pharma companies to do various kinds of experiments with it. It's very important. What is happening to this sample? Nobody knows. Nobody has raised a very clear-cut issue about it. Are some kind of biobanks being created for the COVID specimens in India, so that it could be used for the experiment by the Indian scientists in coming time? We don't know. And if it is given away for commercial purposes, and if the commercial agencies develop something out of it which has a high profit, should it be shared with the society in general, or they just can make profit without sharing anything with the society? If it is given out abroad, what kind of agreements are being done with the agencies abroad? So these are the issues. In India, I don't think biological specimens are being sent abroad. But if there is any possibility of that kind, then this things really apply. This is a very important area of hospitals. You know that in India, healthcare is largely in the private sector. The government sector is very weak. You are in Odisha, you know what kind of government hospitals exist. The quality is bad. It is being used mainly by the poor people. The primary health centers and sub-centers don't work as well as they should. District hospital and the community health centers also are very resource poor. The government is not giving enough resources there. Only 1.2% of the GDP is the government spending. The rest of something like 4% of the GDP or 5% of the GDP, people are paying from their own pocket. So this is a neoliberal health economics which prioritizes everything. Even government comes out with insurance plans where government buys the services for the poor people from the private sector, but it will not set up its own hospital and run them well. So this whole market determination, when during this COVID kind of pandemic, becomes a real problem. What do? How people will get the healthcare? Large number of people who got infected initially were in Bombay city were all poor people, because lockdown means people in big buildings were protected to begin with, but the people who were in the poor localities were not. So even Dharavi, which is now given out as a big example of controlling the pandemic, was to begin with was a big place it was a hot place where a large number of infection happened and many people died. So because they did not have very good access to healthcare, they had no money. And in private sector, you don't get services if you don't have money. The public healthcare sector is starved, used by the poor, and in bad condition. Quality is there, bad. Pandemic response is anchored around the public healthcare sector, as it is the only one to offer care without any barriers. What does one do when the public healthcare is overwhelmed by the epidemic? So many cases that public healthcare cannot take care of it. So, what was needed to be done at the time? Bring healthcare sector, including public, private, and others, under one governance system, uniform quality and without barrier to the access. That means government says that everybody who gets COVID, because it's a national emergency, everybody who gets it will get treatment free of charge. And they will allocate who will go where, on the basis of consecutive numbers. A very good, simple governance system. Streamline the management of the patient. As soon as laboratory says that this person is COVID positive and needs admission in the hospital, the person is allocated the bed in the nearest hospital available, and that should be done by an independent agency. A good management system, so that person doesn't have to go from hospital to get a bed. And if you have all the facilities available in the public, private, and other sectors, then you may be able to provide it. Allocation for reciprocity. That means give priority to the healthcare workers and the other frontline workers. It should not give priority to the people who are rich, people who are powerful. VIPs, again, all VIPs should not be able to get priority, facilities. Today, what is happening is that people who have money and people who have power, they get the priority. Even if they don't require a hospitalization, they are having mild infection, they just go and occupy the hospital bed, which is so precious at this moment because of the pandemic. Our film stars have gone, big film stars, and occupied the beds for 15 days and something like that, when they actually were having mild infection. You require hospitalization only when the infection becomes moderately high and acute. Otherwise, you don't require. And they had a very good houses where they can do, they can isolate themselves in their own houses and take care of themselves. The other is that once they come to the hospital, how do you decide who will get, intensive care unit bed and who will not get it? So there is a duty to conserve limited resources. So you have to prioritize who will get which treatment. That means you need to have a triage guideline. Triaging is that when the patient arrives in the hospital, you classify them. Who requires immediate care? Who can wait? Who will go into the intensive care units and all? And that guideline should be very specific and should be based on medical criteria. Should not be based on person's capacity to pay or having power. Then the triage guidelines work without discriminating people. There should be a separation of responsibilities. The doctor who are going to treat the person should not be doing the triaging. Triaging should be done by the other set of the healthcare professional, so that there is no conflict of interest there. And there should be availability of review process. If the triage guidelines is wrongly implemented, there should be within the hospital some kind of a review process available. Now, a couple of last slides. There are people who are vulnerable, as I was telling you, people who are poor, people who are living on the daily labor, and they have a difficulty in accessing services. They require alternative communication strategies. You can't go and tell them that, okay, go and read English papers, you're there. No, you have to go actually explain to them. That's what they did it in Dharavi, to bring down, where the people went, the health workers, the paramedical health workers, and the general practitioners of the area went from place to place and went to the houses, explained to them, and nobody said that they will not participate in testing, and they created a better quality COVID care center, the quarantine centers within the community or near the community. People felt very confident about going there and isolating them there. So we have to ensure that these vulnerable people do not carry the disproportionate burden of the epidemic. When resources are being allocated, they must be allocated keeping their need in mind. Unfortunately, in Indian epidemic, none of these things happen. There are research issues. I don't know how many of you are following it. There's issues related to different kind of drugs that are being approved in India. Most of the antiviral drugs that got approved and research standard was very bad, and the approval was not based on real scientific evidence. So antiviral drug, people may say, doctor may give you prescription costing very high. Like one shot costing you 4,000, 5,000 rupees, and high cost drugs not having really good effect against the virus. What is best thing that is helping people is availability of oxygen when they need it, when the oxygen levels go down. There were good studies done in the UK about corticosteroid in its right kind of use. There were also issues related to blood clotting because of the virus impact on the body. So anti-drug clotting drugs and all, those were more effective. What is most important in this, if one person gets infected, is to have high quality clinical care. Rather than waiting for the magic bullet of an antiviral drug, if you have a good hospital care system where the doctor is available, doctor is intelligent and competent, the things will be taken care of much, much better. So the research is being done during COVID time. At least in India, it seems that some corners were cut in terms of scientific methodology, having very, very small sample size. When lakhs of people are suffering, why do we have a sample size of 30 in order to test a drug? But that has been done. Our regulator has not been as stringent as should have been. So research design and how the research is carried out is a major issue. The vaccine research also is a very important area. While you can speed up the research, you cannot cut corners as far as the science and ethics is concerned. But at the same time, there is so much of desperation. There's a lot of pressure on the scientists and the doctors to discover immediately a good drug to cure the COVID or get a vaccine to prevent the COVID. All of us who are in science know that if it happens, suppose in next few months, it will be by accident. Normally, getting a high quality new drug, which really effective, takes ages. 80 to 85% of the new drugs that we try out, they fail. They don't produce the kind of results we want. So I don't know which vaccine will succeed, but if it succeeds, then we have to ensure that it is available to people who need it, the vulnerable people who need it. It should be public good. It should be given free of charge to people. And it should be given to those who are exposed and who are more likely to suffer because of the pandemic first, than giving it to others who are highly protected within their building or within their big houses or cottages or whatever is there. Right? Another part of the research is that most of the research is carried out in secrecy, in the sense that the good data, the research proposals or the protocols of the research, the way they carry it out, the way they analyze data, that is not made public. So on one hand, world is facing a massive challenge from a disease. On the other hand, the research on this disease is being carried out is still only partially made available in the public domain. The rest is still not there. So if I'm a good scientist and I want to reanalyze data of phase 1 and phase 2, say, vaccine trial, which have been completed, I don't get those data. I don't, can't do the reanalysis to find out whether they are really, have done it well, or it is some other problem in the data. So these are the problems that we have. We have a public health system, but the public health system is still has a problem of its own. And keeping that in mind, we need to strengthen the public health system. Otherwise, we are going to be swept away by the market forces, because the private sector is very strong and it's not going to really take care of the people who need the most. Anyway, any question, any comment? I think perhaps we can say there are 12, 13 people on the chat.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot, Dr. Amar Jesani, for providing a different perspective, or better say, realities of healthcare. It is true that lockdown has slowed down the spread but not stopped. And yes, there is a failure of communication on the part of government somewhere. And more than this, the neoliberal economy acts as a catalyzing agent for the spreading of coronavirus. And yes, there is some questions on chat box. And to initiate the discussion forum, I would like to invite Mr. Shubham Das. Sir, he will be reading the questions for you.
Oh, I can see them here. You want me to go through them first?
Okay, sir, if you want to.
Yeah,
okay, sir, as you wish. Okay, sir,
okay. So are you okay? This is all China. Okay, with hospitals across India reporting the shortage of personal protection equipment for health workers, why hasn't the government released clear data on the existing stockpile of coveralls, masks, gloves, as well as estimates of future requirements and the availability? Very good question. I will ask the same question to the government, but the government is not answering me. What do I do? The point is, when the crisis started in March, when government woke up to the pandemic, India was still exporting many of this equipment, and they continued exporting for next 2-3 weeks. And while our health workers were getting infected here. So if you remember the media highlights of that time, in the third and fourth week of March and the first week of April, it was related to this, saying that, well, why are you not why are you allowing the export of all this thing? The other area is as you are saying, that they should have told us what is the stockpile available, how it is being distributed, which state is getting what. And it should be like this, that those states which are having more infection, they should be provided more supply. But then, as you could see, that most of the distributions were politically determined. They were not determined by the requirement. So if a state is a dissident or in opposition, it will get less importance as compared to the others. So there are a lot of discriminatory attitudes that I could see. The other part is that, as I said in my presentation, that it is not only about the national level distribution, it is also distribution within the institution. In the hospital, who gets it first? Now, I'm a doctor, and I will tell you that the person who comes in contact with the patient the most is the nurse. Okay, because the nurse has to spend a lot of caring time, while doctor spends time, but it is not as much as nurse does. And so, who should be prioritized there? Who should be protected? So there were a lot of problems related to this, that only certain people were getting in the hospitals, others were not able to get it. So yes, initially there was also genuine shortage in the sense that we didn't have enough equipment. There's still a lot of scandals coming out where the wrong kind of people being given contract to produce ventilators and this kind of thing. I don't go into that. These are all corruption related issues and that kind of stuff, which should not have happened. Those who produce this equipment, they should not have done profiteering. Price was kept very high. Government should have purchased, from all of them. Government can come and force me to test, even against my wishes, but it can't force the industry to go to do things against the wishes. That was very, very poor, because my rights can be violated, but the rights of the commercial sector cannot be violated. That was the problem. It took a lot of efforts by these NGOs and other people. You'll find that there are few petition lying, public interest litigation in Supreme Court as well as in High Courts. All of them asking for regulation of the prices in the private sector. Forget about giving everything free of charge. They collected bills in the hospital where the PPE, the public personal protection equipment, was separately charged in lakhs of rupees, in each bill. And that became a big scandal and big problem where the court had to intervene. I believe that first thing should have been not just to regulate price in the private sector. It should have been providing everybody free access, but that didn't happen. Unfortunate part, but that didn't happen. While as compared to that, Europe and others which are having universal access services, there it was provided. Most countries have made next question testing available for free. Same thing. In India, it was not done. The private lab were initially given, allowed to charge very high amount of money, and now it has gradually brought it down. Why they have done it? No idea. The cost of this equipment remains same, and yet prices are now come down, but at the time they were very high. You can see that it was done because they wanted to allow the private sector to make profit. Profiteering should have stopped. It should have been considered criminal act to profit over pandemic when people were getting infected and dying. But that didn't happen. Unfortunate part. We say that of Vasudeva Kutumbha. We come from a culture where we support each other, love each other. We are like neighbors, part of the same family. And yet, we allow some family members to exploit other family members. This is not done. So I agree with you that the keeping this cost of 4,500 rupees and all, they were all part of the market gimmicks to allow people to do, profiteering on it. You have to go to the court. You will find in Bombay High Court, we have filed cases. I am part of the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan Bombay group, which has filed even a case, intervened in a public interest litigation in Supreme Court. We have cases going on in Bombay High Court to bring down the costs, and to a certain extent, we have succeeded in bringing down the costs with the court intervention and some of the public campaign. But we haven't been successful in making COVID testing and care free of charge for the people. I'm sorry, we have not succeeded. It requires a big people's movement, and hopefully people like you who are young students who will understand that they will have to come forward to fight and see that every government, forget about political parties, the government should make allocation for care of the people who are suffering from COVID. They are making lakhs of crore rupees being given to all kind of industrialists and all. That is not going to help. Here is very, very important. Why can't they give that much of money for this? When this is a big crisis of the entire country, such a big crisis that we have to have a lockdown. Entire economy is suffering. And at the time we don't take care of the people who are the epidemic itself. This is a very irrational approach that is being taken. Is unlock process to protect public health from the COVID? Well, unlocking is normally, if you look at other countries, that they started unlocking the economy when the graph of infection was declining. As decline started, they gradually started lifting the lockdown. While in India, what has happened that we went into the lockdown too early. When the infections were very low, at that time they should have given people, say, 5 days or 10 days to go back wherever they wanted to go back. If the people wanted to get their ration, they should have been allowed to get ration. Or government should have made ration available at a very low rate to people so that people can have it for next 3 months. And then started the lockdown. Even countries like Singapore and Hong Kong and all, they gave notice of 5 to 7 days to people before starting the lockdown. We imposed lockdown too early when the things were. And then when it was not able to, bring the curve, get the curve down, because of the economic reasons, we have to lift the lockdown. And as we lift the lockdown, things are going up. And yes, today you see that we have every day 80 to 95,000 cases being reported from different parts of the country. So it is not coming down. Whereas certain other rates are coming down, but it is too early to say whether we are succeeding in the fight against COVID. How long it will go on, and the number keep increasing, I have absolutely no idea. Because what is happening is that the infection is spreading into at the district level, sub-district level, and villages. And our healthcare services is not good there. And how much preventive measures we'll be able to take, I have no idea. How much testing we'll be able to do in the villages, we have no idea. So far, big cities were affected. Now we are going beyond it. So it's a challenge. I will not declare a premature victory or saying that, well, we are getting out of it without having very good data to look at it. The other thing is that if people are mildly infected, then it may provide some immunity to them. And so there may be a natural way of infection going down. As of now, it has happened in some localities, but it has not happened at the national level. National level, I think numbers are increasing because the spread is increasing. They are not able to, check the spread at the moment. Lockdown's job was to check the spread. Today we didn't need more measures to check the spread, but we are totally tired of having any lockdown. So it's a very difficult time. I can't say what would be the right way of going about. The lockdown is not going to succeed because it's a community transmission. People are, it's not people coming from outside who are transmitting it. Within the community, there are reservoirs of infections, and they are transmitting it all around. Anything else? Anybody who has got? I think I have covered most of the questions. Any question that I might have missed out?
No, sir. That's all. Thanks a lot for responding all the questions in an elaborate manner. It was actually a wonderful session where both the speakers have spoken about the realities prevailing. But as it has to conclude, I would like to invite Mr. Shubham Das to give vote of thanks and conclude the session. Hello, Mr. Shubham Das, we cannot hear you.
Unmute. No sound. Okay, seems.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you can carry on.
Okay. I deem it a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this session such a resounding success. First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed guest, Professor Dayathusu and Dr. Amar Jasani, for making excellent presentations and making this webinar interesting and such a meaningful. I would also like to thank Dr. Vikram Kesari Jena, Director of CARD Odisha, for his hearty cooperation to organize this webinar. I would like to express my profound gratitude to our principal, Professor Pallab Chakrabarty, for his cooperation in organizing this event. I would also like to thank Professor Sarath Chandra Pradhan, convener, and Mr. Rudran Narayan Das, coordinator, and Ms. Payal Agrawal and Mr. Vaidar Das, co-coordinator, for their support and guidance. I am happy to express vote of thanks to all the participants, including lecturers, professors, students, civil society members, media persons who have made this webinar a grand success by sparing their valuable time with us. Thank you all. The meeting is concluded now.
Okay, thank you very much. So bye-bye to everybody. And keep in touch. If any question, you can send me an email.